Introducing On the Horizon, a podcast by Horizon Resources Cooperative, supporting farmers and ranchers across northwest North Dakota and northeast Montana. Join host Levi Hall as he engages with agronomy experts, grain traders, and community leaders, sharing insights to help you make confident, informed decisions for your operations. From market trends to practical advice, we bring you the conversations that matter.
Horizon Resources, solutions for your success.
Welcome back to On the Horizon. This week we have Kayla Burkhart, the general manager of Dakota Midland Grain. Kayla works out of the Surrey office, usually just east of Minot, and is, like I said, the general manager over there. And we serve on the North Dakota Grain Dealers Association board of directors together, myself as the first vice chair and her as the second vice. And so we've gotten to know each other quite well through that association. And I often refer to Kayla as the smartest person on that board. Once you listen to this episode, you'll be able to clearly see why that is. Enjoy the show.
In 2024, Horizon Resource members earned over $21.5 million in patronage, 10.3% on feed, 12.4% on retail, 12.7% on agronomy, 10.9% on energy, 45 cents per bushel on durum, $2.25 per hundredweight on canola. When you're a member, every purchase pays you back.
Horizon Resources, solutions for your success.
Welcome back to another episode of On the Horizon. This week, we have an industry friend of mine, Kayla Burkhart. Kayla, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Levi. Happy to be here.
So, Kayla, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself? You are in the grain industry, or it's really changed so much in the last few years. It used to be grain specific, agronomy specific, and now a lot of these whether it's cooperatives or privates, are really starting to be multifaceted or have expressed growth in multifaceted. So talk a little bit about yourself, and then Dakota Midland, where you're the general manager.
Yeah, so I have been in the grain industry for 17 years now. I started out working for a large co-op, and I came out to North Dakota. Was supposed to be only 6 months, but met a man, and here I am 17 years later. I manage a grain division over there, and 6 years ago, the opportunity came to apply for the GM position here at Dakota Midland Grain. So I took that job, and I've been here for 6 years. DMG, Dakota Midland, is owned by, half owned by ADM and then half owned by Minot Farmers Elevator. In the late 90s, early 2000s, MFE was looking to partner with someone, and they partnered with ADM BQ out of the Minneapolis office. So we have 3 locations east of Minot, 2 BN circle tracks and 1 CP ladder track in Voltaire. So we're primarily grain, but we also have a small fertilizer shed and some agronomy assets, both at our Voltaire and Surrey locations.
Okay, so Kayla, you and I really got to know each other here recently. We are both serving on the North Dakota Grain Dealers Association board of directors. And so the NDGDA is an association that I absolutely love. It's a phenomenal organization that works really hard for the grain elevator industry specifically. But like you mentioned, you guys have a component of your company that is owned by farmers, much like we are 100% owned by our farmers. Talk a little bit about how the North Dakota Grain Dealers Association benefits both the farmers and the industry, if you will.
I think, North Dakota Grain Dealers Association spends, a lot of time advocating for fair trade, working with the railroads. So, as rates get more expensive on the railroads, that can typically widen out basis for our growers and things like that. So the North Dakota Grain Dealers Association will advocate on our behalf to keep those rates fair and competitive, which comes straight back to the farmer's bottom line. We'll also make sure that we are working with our state government to make sure that they're making sound policy regarding trade and things like that so that we can make sure we're benefiting the grower, and keeping our markets fluid.
I hope I hope to have Stu Letcher, the executive director from North Dakota Grain Dealers, on the podcast eventually. And we can go deeper into it there. But one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on was you were on the exec committee for the NGFA, the National Grain and Feed Association, which is a huge deal. It's wonderful to have North Dakota representation on that committee. Why don't you talk a little bit about what that committee does, what the NGFA does, and then you guys recently got done with a fly-in, and let's talk a little bit about some of those talking points that you guys had while out there.
Sure. So the National Grain and Feed Association is a national association of representing grain, feed, and related commercial businesses in the ag space. So crush plants, feed mills, grain elevators, things like that. So for Dakota Midland Grain or Horizon Resources to have an office in DC is cost prohibitive. So we have a national office representing our industry interests, at the cost of an association fee versus the cost of, running that office ourselves. So that's really beneficial. The National Grain and Feed Association has a very large board of directors. There's around 65 people on that board. So within the board, we have the executive committee, and the executive committee is made up of about 18 industry professionals, and we're talking, all depths of the industry. I'm definitely the smallest business in the room. So ADM has a rep on there, CHS, Cargill, AgTagra, all have a seat at that table, as well as Dakota Midland Grain and North Dakota Grain Dealers Association. So what's been really great is, something will come up. One that comes to front of mind is the National Grain and Feed Association will say, hey, we're seeing an issue with train return times coming up out of Mexico. What's happening with the delays on the border between Mexico and the U.S.? So at the time, Dakota Midland Grain was not shipping a lot of trains to Mexico, but I knew that there were some of our peers within the state who were. So I reached out to them and I was like, what's going on with these trains coming to Mexico? What are you seeing on the returns? And I reached out to them, and then I took that feedback straight to DC. So, and that comes back to help the farmer, because the quicker turn times we have, the more fluid the elevators can stay and provide them market access when they need it the most. So we have a voice at the table. And that's been great. Another issue that the NGFA has been involved in is our shipbuilding. The president is very huge on increasing our shipbuilding industry, which is great. There was a provision within that shipbuilding, Section 301, that increased the taxes on Chinese built and owned ships. And what that does is, a large percentage of the ship fleet is actually Chinese owned and operated. So what that would have done for soybeans headed out through the Pacific Northwest is made that more expensive to ship those beans. And the NGFA worked really hard to support the shipbuilding initiatives while protecting those costs from going on to agricultural products. So those are the types of things that we're working on, and really have made a lot of headway on. Being on the executive committee has been a lot of fun, a little bit intimidating. You're in there with some people with some big titles and big names, and I'm running a half co-op, half JV out here in eastern Minot. So, great people, great contacts, great experience, and I'm happy to be able to be that bridge to get North Dakota into DC, to just make sure that as we're making policy, it's common sense and keeps markets open for our farmers.
You're doing a great job at it. You're doing a great job representing North Dakota on the national level. And you guys did a fly-in recently, and there were quite a few topics. And what I hope people don't think, and we've tried to stress this early in this podcast, that this is mutually beneficial stuff. One of the main things that you guys talked about on that fly-in was the farm bill. I know that wasn't the only thing, so why don't you talk a little bit about the farm bill, the messaging you had, and some of the reception you had with some of the legislators, and talk a little bit about some of the other things as well.
Yeah. So this fly-in this year was the 5th that I have done in the past 10 years or so. So I have been to DC multiple times, meeting with, and always focused on ag trade, meeting with North Dakota's delegation as well as the USDA, and others. And I will say that the tone in DC on ag-related issues is so much more positive than I have seen on any other trip out to DC, on both sides of the aisle. So we met with Democrats and Republicans about the completion of a farm bill, and both are dug in and passionate about getting something done within, within a reasonable amount of time, since we are already running behind on the farm bill. Um, NGFA's focus would be on, keeping productive acres in production. So just keeping a cap on CRP, um, and just making sure we're not putting, the CRP acres are going in that are going in are the ones that make sense to be in the program. Um, the other one, we would want a decoupled commodity program within that as well. From an NGFA standpoint, we're not necessarily worried about reference prices and things like that, though we understand that and support that, reference prices probably do need to go up on some of that crop insurance just to support the overall farm economy. Um, the unfortunate part that there's only 15% of the farm bill is actually farming. So there becomes a lot of extra noise and static within there that, doesn't necessarily support our interests. So, um, that was the big farm bill pieces that we were covered, and the North Dakota delegation was completely aligned with us on. Um, the next few things we talked about in DC. So we had 6 North Dakotans there from 4 grain companies across the state. Um, they all met with our delegation and had positive and constructive meetings with them. I, however, went on to meet with the Department of the Interior to talk about the Snake River Dam removal issue. Um, Secretary Burgum was out of town. He was in Alaska for work. So we did meet with his deputy secretary, and she was absolutely fantastic. She was completely engaged on the topic. And for those who don't know, the Lower Snake River dams are wanting to be removed by the tribes for their right to fish. We respect the tribal right to fish. However, this would totally kill commerce. And why this matters to North Dakota is because those dams are part of the larger network that we export our wheat and soybeans out on. So if those dams get removed, it can impact the dams downriver that we export through. And it's also the world's largest third export port. So we just need to protect and preserve that commerce, and there's not the infrastructure in place to deal with that. And then it also sets a precedent for further dam removal as well, and that's the concern. So we did hear that, that legislation has been put in place to not move forward with the dam removal. So that came out last week. So that was exciting. Then we also met with the USDA with a focus on trade. Secretary Rollins was overseas working on trade deals. So we met with her Deputy Secretary Beckering, and this was the most engaged I've seen the USDA. They were wanting and really passionate about making long-term trade deals that are effective for the grower. So they were really wanting to find a solution, and a solution that works for, years down the road. So I thought it was a really great meeting with the USDA on trade and promoting U.S. trade. It sounds like we could, have several things coming down the pipeline here. Um, they're talking about deals with India, which would be a great market for us to access due to their population. So that was really great and really exciting to see, because a lot of North Dakota beans and wheat do head west out through those ports. We need to make sure we have markets for our product. So, and then we also met with the House Ag Chairman, G.T. Thompson, and he has done a lot of work for farmers and the National Grain and Feed Association as far as Farm Bill and Section 301. So we met with him. And then another group, we went and met with the U.S. trade representatives to discuss the Section 301 shipbuilding measures and things like that. So it was very productive, very receptive. And like I said, DC is just extremely engaged and passionate about making things happen on behalf of the farmer. So it was a good fly-in.
Well, that's great to hear. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, Kayla, and giving us an update. So thank you so much for joining, and maybe we'll look forward to having you on again sometime.
Anytime. Thanks, Levi.
Thank you for tuning in to On the Horizon. If our conversation today sparked your interest, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. Stay connected by following @Horizon Resources Co-op on Facebook and Instagram, and explore the world of agriculture with us. We're excited to continue bringing you real conversations with Horizon Resources industry partners, member owners, and employees, discovering more about your local neighbors and community friends. Until next time, keep looking towards the horizon.
Horizon Resources, solutions for your success.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not to be used or considered as an offer or a solicitation to buy or sell commodities. Horizon Resources does not make any representation, warranty, or guarantee as to the completeness, accuracy, timeliness, or suitability of any information contained within any part of this podcast. Horizon Resources does not accept any liability for any loss or damage, including without limitation loss of profit, which may arise directly or indirectly from use or reliance on such information. Whilst the information provided has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, Horizon Resources does not attest to its accuracy or completeness. Horizon Resources reserves the right to change any source without restriction or notice. The information herein is indicative only and is subject to change.